Welcome back, everyone. We are now on to risk management, okay? We've got 7 processes here, so it's a big one. But before we went on a break, I asked you to compile what you do not know. And I want to go through very quick some of the items that you chatted in and address these real quick for you, just to make sure we get that value that we're looking for out of the session. I really want to hammer on those things that may have thrown you for a loop. So let me show you what I'm looking at over here. The entries that we got, and then we'll come back and talk about the processes proper. All right, so we have from Catherine here, perform qualitative risk analysis. Risk report is a project document update, but not an input to the process. Very good point. So the reason why it has not been shown as an input is obviously an error. There's no reason for not considering something you are updating as an input in my mind, but due to PMI's quirks, they may have seen just the risk register as an input because what you're doing is you're ranking risks, you're putting risks in order of priority, and it is when you get done with perform qualitative risk analysis that you go back and update the risk report with the findings you got from this process. But coming in, you really don't need the risk report to get started on perform qualitative risk analysis. But in my mind, you need it to be updated. So whichever argument they present, I would have said anything that's an output, include it for its relevance. But PMI don't roll that way. So if we're going to do perform qualitative risk analysis, we wouldn't need a risk report. What we would need is a risk register. Then we go through the risks, we prioritize them, and then we have additional information to add to the risk report. So I hope that helps. Jeff says 7 processes. So we'll go through all those processes, Jeff. What comes to my mind is just information for you to remember that the optional process from all of those processes, the optional one, it's called perform quantitative risk analysis. So I'm hoping that by the time we're done, you have a better idea of what am I doing and what exactly is the PMI saying I do. All right, let's take a look at what Rachel has chatted in. The EMV formula, very good, Rachel. So let's see, the EMV formula, expected monetary value. Let me just do it here. Oh, and reserve analysis, okay. So let's do it here. EMV, actually, let me do it in the comments. So EMV, expected monetary value, is equal to percent, that is the probability, times impact. And it could be impact in dollars. All right, that's EMV. And the key thing about qualitative versus quantitative, you can say qualitative deals with a high, medium, low, or a score that is on a scale. But quantitative deals with hours or dollars, usually currency of some sort. Okay, so when you're thinking about qualitative, think about on a scale of 1 to 5, the probability is a 1. On a scale of 1 to 5, the impact is a 3. That's qualitative. But quantitative will say the probability is 30%. That is more quantitative. Or the impact is $500,000. That's quantitative. Oh, very good. What else do we have here? Let's see. Anything else? Oh, reserve analysis. So you need to ensure you have enough reserves as a risk measure. So when you're doing your monitor risks, you want to make sure that you address the topic. Do we have enough reserves on this project? All right, let's see what else. Okay, well, that was pretty quick. Anything else? Jeff, let's see, anything else? Identifying which processes you are in when tasks overlap. Yes, and Jeff, you know what my comment on this would be? My comment would be the key benefits definitely is a good clue. So I'll just say, know your process descriptions, extended descriptions, and key benefits. That will really help you a whole lot. All right, what else? I think that's it. Okay. Well, if there's anything else, you know that I will always love to answer these questions. Just make sure you put them in. I'm going to go back to this sheet. It's been a pretty chaotic week because in addition to the training I've been doing, the bootcamp stuff I've been doing, I've been working with other countries and companies, and sometimes it's real early morning, like 3 a.m. type meetings, 6 a.m. type meetings. So it has been rather involved and busy. But as we begin to move away from a lot of what we're doing into more focus on exam prep, I will be taking a look at that sheet more and more as the days go on. All right, so let's talk about risk management. As usual, we're going to do a high-level view of the processes, but it'll be a very brief one, and then we'll get into some meat really quick. So what is risk management? It's the process of conducting risk management planning, identification, analysis, response planning, response implementation, and monitoring risk on a project. The objectives of project risk management are to increase the probability and/or impact of positive risks and to decrease the probability and/or impact of negative risks in order to optimize the chances of project success. Take a look at the breakdown. We've got 7 processes here. It's quite a lot of stuff. I want to really encourage you to go back and read every one of these. But we have 5 here in planning, 1 in executing, 1 in monitoring and controlling. You got to get the names straight. So let's take a look at each one at a high level. So plan risk management, the process of defining how to conduct risk management activities for the project. In other words, you're going to get a risk management plan as an output. What are the contents of a risk management plan? Well, let's read a little bit more about the process. This is the process of defining how to conduct risk management. How are we going to identify the risks? How are we going to qualify or analyze the risks, whether qualitative, qualify, or quantitative, quantify? How are we going to do all this? All right, that's the summary. Okay, the key benefit of this process is that it ensures that the degree, the type, and visibility of risk management are proportionate to both risks and the importance of the project to the organization. So in other words, if it's a big project, high visibility, pay close attention to how you do your risk management. All right, so again, the major output is this, the risk management plan. What is in the risk management plan? Well, why don't we read in the PMBOK guide together? The first thing that you get in the risk management plan listed here in the PMBOK guide is a risk strategy. What is a risk strategy? The risk strategy is the overarching idea of how to manage risks. For example, in a previous project I was in, managing a divestiture from Motorola to Emerson, Our strategy at that time was, if you find any overall project risks that can bring the project to its knees, risk that could affect this divestiture, management needs to know about it like yesterday. And that was an overarching strategy, but it helped us know how risks needed to be identified and rapidly communicated, those of significance, okay? Take a look at page 405, strategy, risk strategy. What does it say? Describes the general approach. What is your general approach? Could be described in a number of ways. Our general approach was escalated risks must be escalated ASAP. Risks that could affect the project overall must be communicated ASAP. It's a strategy. What else? The methodology. Someone says, oh, we need to use a risk breakdown structure. We need to use a risk probability and impact matrix. Now you're talking about the methodology. What about the roles and responsibilities? Who does what in the risk management activity set that you are using? What about funding? Identifies the funds needed to perform activities related to risk management. You got to know where the money is coming from. You got to know the timing. How often are you going to do these risk activities? And then you need to have categories to break down your risks so you can categorize them as needed. What do these categories look like? Take a look at page 406. On page 406, what do you see? Technical risk, management risk, commercial risk, external risk. But that's not all. You can actually break these down in a variety of ways. So this is just one example of a risk breakdown structure. Okay? So when we talk about risk categories, that's it. The next one is stakeholder risk appetite. Think about it. If you're really hungry and you find yourself on a freeway, your vehicle's broken down, but you know that there's a burger shack maybe 2 miles away, you will walk there. If you're really hungry. But if you're not really hungry, you'd say, no, I'm not going to walk. 2 miles is too far. So what is risk appetite? It's a measure of how much risk you're willing to take. How hungry are you? Let's read. It says, a risk appetite of key stakeholders on the project are recorded in the risk management plan. So for your exam, you just need to know the risk appetite is there. How do we show risk appetite? It says, in particular, stakeholder risk appetite should be expressed as measurable risk thresholds around each project objective. These thresholds will determine the acceptable level of overall project risk exposure. And they are also used to inform the definitions of probability and impacts to be used when assessing and prioritizing individual project risk. So how do you quantify these? How do you measure them? Take a look at page 407. When we define risk probability and impact, we could use these. Table 11-1, it says, definitions of risk probability and impact levels are specific to the project context and reflect the risk appetite and thresholds of the organization and key stakeholders. So you see, what they're telling you is, you could say a very high risk to take is anything that has a 70% or greater probability and greater than a 6-month impact on the schedule. You see that? Page 407, the first line. We could say a risk is very high impact if it affects the project cost by greater than 5 million in this particular example. See what I'm saying? Quality, if it has very significant impact on overall functionality. So that is how you need to be thinking about this. All right? The probability and impact matrix can also be defined up front. And this is on page 408. The reporting formats for risk, also on page 408. And tracking, how are you going to track risks? So the summary of this first process, my friends, is this. And it's the beefiest, one of the beefiest of all is this. Your risk management plan is your major output. All right, let's go back. And let's see our next process here. Our next process is simply identify risks. What are you identifying? Which risks could impact the project, and what are the sources of overall project risk? That's it. So what does a risk register look like? Well, I'll show you a quick example here. As you begin to collect information regarding risks, there are three things you want to collect. What is a risk? But you also want to think about the cause of the risk. You also want to think about the effect. Cause, risk, effect. Look at the screen, see it there. Cause, risk, effect. Excuse me. All right, cause, risk, effect. All right, there's a little bit of a delay here, a little bit of a delay in switching over my videos here. But cause, risk, effect, that is the model that you want to use for identify risk. When you're identifying risks, it's not enough to say, oh, the technology could be more difficult than anticipated. You want to go further and say, what could cause that? What is the cause? Oh, what is the effect? What will that do to the project? So cause, risk, effect. Okay. The major output of this process, you got the risk register, you got the risk report. The risk register is where you document the risk, the cause, the effect, all that stuff. But you're going to build on the risk register as we go along. The other one is the risk report. What is a risk report? It's a report that outlines those risks that could affect the project overall, and then the aggregate, the summary, if you like, of all of the risks. What will all the risks do to the project? You could call out those that are more serious than others. You could call out the number of risks, whatever you want to do, but that's the risk report. And these are the two things you get from this process. All right, there's a few things I need to show you here in a little bit of detail. Bear with me as I go to the detail. So in identify risks, how do we identify the risks? We could brainstorm. We could use a checklist to say, oh, those are risks that we should ask. Is this a potential on the project? Like a checklist. We have interviews that we do with people. We have root cause analysis, looking for the root cause of risks. That's how we get the cause, risk, and effect. We have assumptions and constraints. You should look at assumptions and constraints. You could do a SWOT analysis, strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. If you identify where you're strong, where you're weak, where there are opportunities, you could discover opportunities. And if you do it for threats, where there are threats. Document analysis should be done for all of these documents. So all these documents listed here, all of these project management plan components, and all of these project documents, all of that stuff, we're just going to do a document analysis and analyze those documents, looking for risks in those documents. We have prompt lists. Now, under prompt lists, you want to remember these prompt lists. Here are the prompt lists. Pestle, teacup, and VUCA. I'll just say it is worth knowing your prompt list just in case they crop up on the exam. And again, we use these in 11.2 I'm just going to read them real quick for you. Infamous tools and techniques of identify risk. And this is on page 416. So what do they stand for? Page 416, prompt list. You see that? PESO. You can ask the question when you identify a risk. Any political, economic, social, technological, legal, or environmental risks? Are there any? What about technical, environmental, commercial, operational, political? That's TCOP. And VUCA. Volatility, uncertainty, complexity, and ambiguity. And these are used in other fields, other walks of life, but they form a good prompt list framework. So a prompt list is just a predetermined list going through what could happen on the project from these perspectives. All right, and that's pretty much it. That's the gamut of what we can cover for now. Let's go to our next process. The next process is perform qualitative risk analysis. We only have one output, project documents updates. It looks very incomplete. Why does it look so incomplete? Because we are updating, remember Catherine's question? We are updating the risk register and the risk report. Those are always going to appear as project documents updates. You're not going to see this as anything other than project documents updates from now till the end of risk. You're going to keep seeing project documents updates because the risk register is in there. Okay? The inputs, there's really nothing that unique in the inputs. The tools and techniques, I'm going to cover them at a high level. So risk categorization, you need to categorize your risks using your risk breakdown structure. This is where we do that. Under data representation, let's go into some minutia here just to cover this. So under data representation, we've got the probability and impact matrix. And what does that look like? Let's go to our slides and put a face to the name. So this is an example. It's just one example. The PMBOK guide also have an example as well. It's not all colorful and such, but you get the idea. You've got probability on one axis, impact on one axis, you multiply them together, and you get the risk score. So again, page 408, you can see it there as well. So what you're doing in perform qualitative risk analysis, you're finding the probability of occurrence, the impact, and you're multiplying them. That's all. So this little post-it here, it shows the risk, the cause and the effect, but then it shows how you are qualifying it. You are scoring it. You're putting a score on the probability, you're putting a score on the impact, or a rating on the probability, a rating on the impact, and you're getting a score. Okay, so what will that look like? If you do this to your risk register, you end up getting this. See that? So when you've got different scores, you then prioritize them. And you can see in this image, we have some prioritized information. We have risk 1, it was scored as a 20. Risk 2 scored as a 16, kind of in order like that. Okay? Good. All right, so going back to our list of things in this process, we do a risk data quality assessment to make sure we've got good risk data. We do a risk probability and impact assessment. We assess probability and impact to score the risks. And then we have something called assessment of other risk parameters. And I'm going to cover these really quick. So let's go back to our PowerPoint. There are 9 risk parameters to think about. And these 9 parameters are as follows. We have risk urgency, and that is how urgent is it that we respond as quickly as we should. We have risk dormancy, and that is the period of time before we discover the impact of a risk. We have proximity. How close is the risk to us? Is it going to happen 3 months out, 4 months out in terms of the impact? Then we have manageability. How easy is it to manage the risk occurring? We have controllability. How easy it is to control the outcome of the risk. We have detectability. How easy is it to detect? And then we have these other ones, connectivity. How much is the risk connected to other risks? We have strategic impact, and this is the degree to which the risk can impact the strategic goals of the firm. And then we have propinquity, which is a degree of how much the risks matter to stakeholders. All right. And that is pretty much that for perform qualitative risk analysis. Let's talk about the next one, perform quantitative risk analysis. So simply put, we're going to update our risk register with the quantification of the risks. And how do we do that? We have the probability in dollars. We have the impact, probability in percent, impact in dollars. We multiply them and we get what you call the EMV. So let me show you real quick. We have the EMV, and that is percent probability times impact in dollars. Probability times impact. Okay. It's a long story to talk about this. We don't have the luxury of doing it now. Perhaps next week we'll spend some time looking at expected monetary value. Some of you have already heard this during the tech camp, which is why I invited you, but not everyone was on the tech camp. So we'll spend some time next week going through EMV. It's probably one of the more challenging topics in this chapter. For now, I would say read up page 435 in the PMBOK guide and make sure you get that down. So next week we'll just breeze through it. It will be a breeze, okay? Also watch the videos on the LMS. All right, so that's perform quantitative risk analysis. We also have here something called representations of uncertainty. What are representations of uncertainty? Let me show you that quick. So when we talk about these representations of uncertainty, they're really probability distributions. And part of quantitative risk analysis is using a Monte Carlo to run a simulation of the project. And these probability distributions, you can see there are quite a number of them. In order to make an intelligent input into a Monte Carlo, you need to understand probability distributions and which distributions are the best to choose for what type of projects. And that's that. Okay. So we've only got about 4 minutes left. We are going to do a speedy coverage of the remainder. I know a lot of folks have had it, they've had enough. But we will finish this high-level view before we go to any questions that you have on anything else. All right, so we've talked about quantitative. The next one is plan risk responses. And this is where you are planning how to respond to risk. This is probably by far the most important section of risk management because you will get questions on this on the exam. So when we talk about the strategies for threats, we have escalate to a higher authority, avoid the risk, transfer the risk to a third party, mitigate, reduce the probability and or impact, or do nothing. When we talk about accept, we have two types of accept, though, passive and active. How do you remember these? A-team, the A-team on the screen. So avoid, transfer, escalate, accept, mitigate, or however you want to spell them. That's for the negative. For the positive, our responses are different. For the positive, we have a mnemonic that is easy, EASEE. And what does that mean? The letters stand for escalate, escalate to a higher authority, exploit, make sure that the risk does happen, share, transfer some or all of the positive risk to a third party, enhance, increase probability and or impact, and accept, do nothing. So when it comes to plan risk responses, honestly, those are very important. We'll do some more coverage of that next week. All right. The next one is implement risk responses, and this is where you implement the responses that you have decided upon. Escalate, avoid, share, whatever it is. And then the final one here is monitor risks. And this is where you check the risks, track the risks, make sure they haven't happened, update the risk register if they are happening or have happened, or if your strategy has changed or what have you. Okay, so I want to show you these one more time on the screen behind me. So let's cover, that's quantitative, which we've talked about. So plan risk responses is the next one. There it is. And again, you can see we're not really getting anything unique out. We're not. It's just updating the risk register, risk management plan. We've talked about the strategies for threats, strategies for opportunities. You also have contingent response strategies, and these are strategies to be undertaken under certain conditions. And then we have strategies for overall project risk. The same way you can attack the individual project risk, you can attack the risk that affect the entire project. That's what that is. Implement risk responses, honestly, it's just an update. There's really nothing here. You're carrying out the risks. The PMI put this here newly in the 6th edition, just so we could keep our eye on the implementation of the responses. It is important. But one thing to remember about this is you are implementing the response when you carry out the response. So if getting insurance is the response, when you purchase the insurance, you implemented the risk response. Whether you make a claim or not, it's when you purchase the insurance. All right, and the final one is monitor risks. And one of the big ticket items here is the work performance report is an input. So is your work performance data. You don't see this very often. Work performance information is an output. And as far as the details, well, you can see audits. Audits is important, but we also have technical performance analysis. So you're doing an audit on your risk processes, and you're also checking to make sure your technical performance is on schedule. If you're missing milestones for when you say we're going to be functional by this date, oh, we're going to have accomplished this technical objective by this date. If you haven't accomplished it, it's a risk. And that's why we say monitor risk is where we identify new risks as well. We don't just track the old, but we also identify new risks. WPI is an output. We've got change requests over there, and everything else is as usual. All right, so thank you very much for your patience. You have come to the point where you need to think about taking that midterm mock exam. So I think one of the questions earlier was, can I send the midterm mock exam link? And I believe I did. If you didn't get it, I'm going to send it again for good measure. Okay, that is what I would like for you to do for the rest of the day, if you are so inclined. All right, but I'm very concerned about your studying. Some of you, you need to step it up, you know, because this is going towards the end of September. You got October. It's already getting crazy in the test centers. Then you've got November and December. By the time it gets to December, it's so ridiculously mad. And that is when people begin to see issues because everyone's taking the exam. And more people, of course, are taking it. More people are not going to pass it. So you really need to get solid, double down on your studying, and start your earnest final run ASAP. Okay, I'm not trying to scare anyone. I'm just being honest, doing my job, letting you know it gets crazy. It really does. All right, so we are at the point where we are done. Let's go to the beach. We're done, but we still have more to do next week. So I want to congratulate you on getting this far, but we still have the code of ethics. Now we're going to talk about a number of things next week because we kind of ran out of time now. I don't want to keep taking you over. We have to talk about the code of ethics. We have to talk about the remnants of risk. And then I need to give you a high-level overview of everything. So I was thinking about 1.5 to 2 hours at this point. It's probably looking like we might go maybe on 3 hours, maybe even the whole thing. But the bottom line is we need to finish well. We need to finish strong. So, I mean, if we need to do all 4 hours, then you can take your mock exam anytime you want to. Take your mock exam anytime you want to. But do show up next week because we have to put finishing touches to risk, professional responsibility, and then I need to give you a full overview of the 49 and answer questions you have. All right. Very good. So yes, you have access to everything you need. Maybe you should hang on before we jump off. Yeah, very good, Angela. Thank you. Very good. Absolutely. All right. Well, at this point, we're going to stop the recording. And those of you watching after the fact, hello, future selves. And bye for now.